Welcome back to Takis McGinnis Elder Care Law Hour. I'm Tim Takis, and in today's program we're talking about younger onset dementia.
And I'm Barbara McGinnis. In this particular segment, we'll be talking with client Kenna Niles, who'll be telling her story about living with a loved one with early onset dementia, specifically Alzheimer's disease. So thank you, Kenna, for being here and for telling us your story. Just tell us about Bill, your husband, and how old was he when he was diagnosed?
He was diagnosed when he was 53. It was the first time anyone said the word Alzheimer's to us.
And so how did you discover that something was wrong with Bill?
He was having trouble doing some typical things that he used to do around the house, painting a wall or putting up a shelf. Then we noticed that he was having trouble at work, doing things he had done for 30 years.
And what kind of work did he do?
He was a police officer for 32 years.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So when you noticed something was wrong, you went to the doctor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which doctor did you go to? Your primary care doctor?
Yes, we went to our primary care doctor. We had a relationship with her, so she knew us well enough to know that when she was talking to Bill and did some testing on him, that he had some cognitive problems.
And so what happened? What was how did that progress?
Well, we went to a neurologist, and he had some extensive testing done, and they decided, it took a few months, but decided then that they felt he had Alzheimer's disease.
Right. And so how did you react to knowing that your husband, how long have you been married?
We've been married 37 years.
That your husband of 30-some years is, I can't imagine being 53 and then realizing that.
Right. Well, it was a shock, of course. We had no family history of Alzheimer's. And so that wasn't on our radar. We knew something wasn't right, but we had no idea it was going to be something like that. Mm-hmm. It was very difficult to accept at first. Yeah. And we thought maybe that he was misdiagnosed, but 4 years later we know that he was not.
So what were some of your concerns when you got that diagnosis?
There are a lot of concerns. His main concern was he wanted to provide, he wanted to keep working. And so he did the best he could with that. We wanted to make sure our legal documents were all the way they should be, and they weren't. We had wills and different things, but we didn't have what we needed. We needed to get our financial affairs in order, and we always thought we'd done good at that. But when you're faced with something like this, you find out maybe you weren't as prepared as you thought you were.
Yeah, because that's cutting short earning years by 10, 15 years short.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And that has a lot of impact on your long-term care.
Mm-hmm.
So what about work? First segment, Tim and I were talking about what happens at work. Mm-hmm. Did his employer make accommodations? Were they helpful?
They did. They were really great about that. He insisted on working, and they were willing to make the accommodations.
And I think it was at Vanderbilt, is that right?
It was at Vanderbilt.
Okay.
He worked for the police department there. They helped him with things that he wasn't able to do anymore, like completing paperwork or using the computer. And it did give him that additional 6 months of time on the job.
And what about his insurance? I know I think he was there for 6 months after the diagnosis, and then he retired.
And then he retired, so we went on COBRA, so we were able to keep that health insurance for a little bit longer.
Okay.
So just now we've run out of COBRA. So
I think it's 24 months. Is that correct?
Ours was 18.
18.
18. Mm-hmm.
All right.
So now we just pay for our own insurance.
Okay, so you pay for your own insurance. And Bill, did he do Social Security disability?
He has, yes, Social Security disability.
Okay, can you tell us about how that process went?
Well, we got some help with that. Y'all hooked us up with an attorney that knows his stuff, and so he helped us with that application. And it really, it's a lot of information gathering, and some of those things I didn't have. Bill knew that stuff, and so it took some time to gather the information and apply, and it was granted.
So has he transitioned to Medicare now, though?
Yes.
Okay, so Bill's on Medicare after 24 months of being on he didn't have COBRA for the full 24 months, but he could have, right? So Social Security. A lot of people, I think, would be interested to know when you're working, we don't worry about health insurance, because usually, especially if you're working for a big employer, you've got insurance. But when you lose that employment prematurely, you worry about insurance coverage, especially So Cobra covered him and you, and then he transitioned to Medicare. You transitioned to a private insurance plan.
Right.
So everybody stayed covered.
Yes.
And
So did he go right from Cobra to Medicare? Was there a gap?
a little gap.
A little gap,
Okay.
but pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, good.
Right.
So there is a safety net system for that. So, okay,
Right.
back to just how you felt about getting that diagnosis and how it impacted you and your life.
Well, it has a huge impact. It really can't say it enough. I was concerned about my husband, how he was going to deal with his disease and accepting it. Concerned about how are we going to make it, financially. It just was not something we were prepared for. And so my kids were concerned, are they going to have Alzheimer's? It just affected everybody in a really big way. But we've made it.
Yeah.
One day at a time, you figure it out, and we've made it this far.
Your children were adults,
Yes, my children are in their 30s.
And they still are.
Yes, they still are.
Yes. Okay.
Well, they were adults
Yes,
when
they were,
when
yes.
Dad was diagnosed.
Yes.
Right, that's what I mean.
Yes.
Yeah, no minors.
Yes,
And
they're in their early 30s.
Which
and
certainly would be a different challenge if you had a minor child.
yes, and I have a friend in that situation,
Yeah.
with a husband with Alzheimer's and have 2 kids in high school.
so you mentioned that they were concerned about the genetic aspect of the disease. Have they been tested?
They have not.
Okay.
One wants to, one does not.
Okay.
They haven't done it yet. But what's really important for people to know too is, you need to get life insurance before you have a diagnosis like that in your family. It's very hard to get life insurance, and one of my kids has it and one does not.
Okay.
So that's another thing to consider.
Yeah, and I guess part of also, and maybe it did not affect you or Bill, but we know that you cannot be discriminated against in getting health insurance if you have a pre-existing condition.
Right.
And of course that's because of the the Affordable Care
Right.
Act. That didn't affect. Apparently, it didn't affect
Right.
Bill, but I imagine maybe it would affect others.
Yes, it might.
So you were able to get health insurance. What about the finances, Kenna? You mentioned that you had to worry about or think about those. Did you have to do something different?
Well, I was always involved in our finances, but I didn't know all the ins and outs of everything that Bill had done through his job. And so I had to learn a lot of things, and we did do some things different.
You actually stepped up and became you have this new role. You're just manager of the family,
Right.
manager of his care.
Right.
What's the care trajectory been like?
What do you mean by that?
Well, caring at home,
Right.
supportive. Then he couldn't
Right.
stay at home by himself while you worked.
Yes.
So he started going to an adult daycare program.
Right, he does. And so that's another thing that when you have a younger onset, I'm a working spouse and taking care of someone with Alzheimer's. So he does go to a day program while I'm at work, and that has just been wonderful. He's been doing that for a year and a half. And it really gave him a place to belong. He felt like he belonged there. And so that has been probably the single best thing that we were able to do for him.
So what about recent challenges? What are you dealing with now? And
Right now, what we're dealing with mostly is he's delusional at this point, and so what we're facing that putting him in memory care piece of the puzzle. We would do that for his safety. He'll get ready to walk out the door because he thinks someone called him for help, and he's dressed and ready to go. So that's a big concern right now. That's kind of what we're facing. He hasn't known who I am for over 6 months. So that's changed our relationship and the fact that I don't have influence on him as much as I used to. It's like I take care of him and he knows I take care of him. But he still thinks he kind of, like I work for him kind of. So that's a big difference in where we're at now.
Right, the roles that you're having to do.
Right.
Well, Kenna, thank you for being here and sharing your story, with our viewers. So in our next segment, we're going to be talking about primary care physicians. We'll be interviewing a primary care physician. What questions should you ask if you're going through this with your loved one? Stay tuned.